might be the best deal I've ever got at the salvage auction. At first glance, it looked just like the hundreds of other Camaro SS's up for auction. But then I noticed something, a little window in the hood that looked familiar. It seems that the old owner of this Camaro has built themselves just a slightly more obese version of the 638 horsepower Corvette ZR1. The craziest part about this whole deal though is the price. We won the auction for $6,600, which for context is what this car likely would have sold for if it didn't have tens of thousands of dollars of work under the hood. I mean, the supercharger kit alone is worth more than we paid for the car. The only explanation that I can come up with is that unless you scroll to the very last pictures on Copart, you'd have never saw what's under the hood. So it's possible this one time it just got overlooked. But sick deal aside, I've got questions. This LS9 blower, it's by far the most difficult supercharger you could have chose to swap onto a Camaro. To make this LS9 supercharger work, you need to convert the entire front half of the engine with parts from a Corvette ZR1, and they're just simply not available. Even if you are lucky enough to find all those parts off a wrecked ZR1, this little power steering pump and the bracket it goes on, that's gonna run you like $3,000 alone. So does somebody really spend an insane amount of money to retrofit just a ZR1 supercharger, or did they swap in an entire LS9 engine? And what kind of drivetrain upgrades did they do to handle all that newfound power? I don't know, we'll figure all that out later. For now, I just want to hear it run. This thing was listed as running in the auction listing. It's got plenty of oil in it, so there's no good reason it shouldn't just fire up. What's your confidence level?
Being a Camaro, probably gling, 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 gling out of the engine.
Every time, every time. Never fails.
We gotta keep it going.
Let's give it a shot. Sounds all right. Other than the obvious exhaust leak, which we haven't even talked about the car yet. We've been so focused on the engine. To be fair, the engine's the reason why we bought this car. I almost can't tell if it's not running real well, or it's just the fact that half the exhaust is blown off of it. It's almost hard to make the distinction given that it sounds so bad from behind, but up here in the engine bay, the blower, it's really, really quiet. These superchargers do have issues with bearings failing in them. They'll get real noisy and rattly. Here at least, it couldn't possibly sound better. As weird as it sounds to say, the car itself was kind of an afterthought when I bought this thing from the auction. It got smoked back here in this rear passenger corner. The entire quarter panel is pushed up, I don't know, a foot. The back of the car is just, in general, not straight any longer. It did, or I guess technically still does, have Borla exhaust, though this one is, well, not really anywhere to be found at the moment. Sure, it's broken off under there somewhere. But all that, it just isn't a concern. The master plan with this car, just like that red eye we pointed out a couple weeks ago, is that we're gonna be able to take this sick engine out of it and sell everything else on the car to recoup all of our money and hopefully at least get that engine for free.
Sounds healthy.
Other than that whole exhaust thing, I mean, minor details.
Minor details.
We just need to clean her out.
Good plan.
Clean her out.
We can't have a dirty engine.
No, we're gonna blow the carbon out of it, right? It's a...
Makes sense.
It is. It's a good thing. This thing moves. I mean, it's not like wicked fast or anything, but it feels good. Now, I do think there's something probably going on in this rear suspension here. It felt a little squirrely, I guess we'll call it. Fun, but squirrely. I can't quite tell if the wheel's off center or towed out a little bit. I don't know. Either way, did it burn out fine? I'll take it.
My professional opinion here is it got rear-ended. That's why it feels squirrely.
I thought you were gonna say something else. I wonder how much power it makes.
Huh. The ZR1, 638 horsepower to the crank. The stock ZR1, they make like 570-ish to the wheels. This does not feel like a 570 horsepower car, I'll tell you that. $499.
Based on what I see and those pulls and the fact that you get traction with those tires.
Oh my God. Well, as much as I want to tell him he's wrong for that, Fernando's always making these outlandish predictions that are way off base, and then they end up being right.
He's normally pretty accurate with the stuff.
Yeah. This Camaro is supposed to make 420 to the flywheel factory, probably like 380, 370 to the wheel. I'm gonna have some faith. 509 whip.
You know he's wrong.
Let's see. Come on, Mopar would never, right?
Technically, I'm right.
My Price is Right rules, yes. You are indeed right. I obviously have way too much faith in the LS9 blower on this engine, whatever it may be. Tim, not a bad guess, but Fernando, once again, has got the best of us when it comes to predicting something.
No.
Unreal. So, if you really think about it, it's not like that out of line. I'm going to try to justify this whole situation here right now. 638 to the flywheel in a ZR1. It's an automatic. There's a lot more drivetrain loss. That's about all I got, actually. It should make more power, probably.
Well, you could be onto something. Drivetrain loss. Maybe that automatic is hurt. Maybe you are literally. Maybe it is making the power and it's hurt through the drivetrain.
Transmission is slipping. Maybe somebody was like abusing it and hurt it. First order of business before we get underneath this thing is to try to recoup ourselves a couple grand out of this interior. There's not a ton of parts in the interior, but the ones that are worth really good money. Just this set of seats alone, being that they're Inferno Orange, which is kind of rare, it's $1,000 off the rip. Then we've got parts like the airbags. A good general rule of thumb to follow if you're parting out a car like this: if it goes boom during a wreck, it's worth money. The steering wheel airbag, that's worth about $300. Our side curtain airbags, the ones that run through the headliner, they're worth about $300. And on these, we've got 2 of them, so that makes it 6. The one outlier to that is the passenger dashboard airbag. Don't know why, but they just don't seem to have any value. Never really sell them. But we can make up for that with the seat belts. These guys have little tensioners in them. When you're in a wreck where the airbags blow, they will lock up, meaning you can't operate them anymore. So when you get a set that aren't blown, worth about $150 for the pair. After that though, it does kind of get thin in here, and it all boils down to one thing. They pumped out hundreds of thousands of V6 Camaros from 2010 to 2015, and unfortunately, all these plastics, the consoles, the carpet, it's effectively worthless. The only parts that really have any value on the interior here are parts like this gauge pack. If it's exclusive to a higher trim car like the Camaro SS, then it might have some value. For this, it's about $150. Yeah, that's gonna about do it for the interior. We will have to go in and get the shifter once it's unbolted from underneath, but otherwise, this is the extent of our spoils from the inside. We got all the parts we already talked about. Then we have this complete orange trim set. These came out of the door panel. They have little LED lights run through them. These, along with the dash trims, that'll be another $250. And then we have this bucket of miscellaneous stuff. That'll all come to about another $200. And then there's the one place we haven't looked yet, the trunk. Sometimes there's nothing, sometimes it's just disgusting, but once in a while we find something good.
Yeah. Oh, whoa.
Ooh.
What's this? Another $50?
The original amplifier, the first one off the assembly line. Now, I'm not gonna say it's the case here, because it's probably, most certainly, definitely not, but sometimes these old amplifiers are worth a ton of money. We've had it in the past where we thought the stuff was kind of junk. It ended up being worth a lot. 90 used? Okay, you know, we'll take this out. Yeah, we'll call this an extra $50 to be safe, which brings our total for the interior to $1,700. Probably could have added another $100, $200 to that. They didn't just have the amplifier, but had the subwoofer to go along with it. But hey, can't complain. $1,700 back on a $6,600 car, and we haven't touched any of the fun stuff. I'm digging it. Works for me. Now, don't know where that went. Now's where the real money comes in. Starting with parts like this hood, which I don't know how much it is yet, but I am sure it's not cheap. There was one of these hoods that I saw online. It was like $1,300. Kind of thought that's what this one was gonna be. Turns out, instead, this one is currently for sale for 57% off, and it is $300 new. So yeah, it's a little bit of a letdown. I'm not too worried about it because there's still a ton of money just in body panels alone on this thing. It really doesn't even matter what kind of car you're working on. Anytime you can get something like this that got railed in the rear end, but most of the front stuff survived, you're gonna be in the green. Our front bumper loaded with all the grills, the fog lights, even considering the little bits of damage that it has, that's $600. Then you got parts like these headlights. They're the HID versions with the black housings and the little halo inside. They're a really popular upgrade for people that don't have these, and for the pair of these, even though they're not exactly the cleanest, still about another $500. On a completely separate note, we did find the heat exchanger for our supercharger system, and it's not the smallest thing in the world, but I'd be certainly lying to you guys if I said I didn't wish it was a little bigger, you know what I mean? There's this hose too, which is nice and kind of crimped up where it runs through the radiator support, or the hole that they cut in the radiator support. We'll get to that in a little bit. As for the rest of the body though, it could really go either way, to be honest. It's all gonna depend on who the parts are made by. These wheels, they kind of, sort of, look like a certain factory style ZR1 wheel, but I don't believe they are. What we got there? Not only do the true ZR1 wheels have an engraved ZR1 logo in the spokes, they're also... Oh man, this is embarrassing. Got stood up, you know?
There we go.
Wow. The ones that are real, they're also made by Alcoa in the USA, so these China specials, not really gonna pull the money that they would, but I still think they're probably worth, I don't know, 500 bucks. They're a nice looking set of wheels, right, Fernando?
Yes.
Not bad. They are really lacking in the tire department, though, you know? Can't imagine why. And it's the same deal with the side skirts. They look like the factory option side skirts, and if they are OEM, they're worth a ton of money. If they are a replica, however, which I do suspect, unfortunately, because of how thin they are and the fact that they're not painted, again, they're just not worth that much money. Let's see. Made in... Oh, hold on. That's the right marking. General Motors, genuine accessories made in Canada. I was extremely wrong on these, but in my defense, they do kind of feel cheap. Usually, those side skirts are bought with this rear valance, which is like 800 bucks from the factory. Obviously, this one's seen better days. It's kind of ground through on both sides, but these little exhaust shrouds inside the diffuser, there we go. These are worth like 100 bucks for the pair. It's not a total loss. Outside of that though, it does start to get a little thin. We got parts like the sunroof, we got a mirror, and the spoiler that was definitely already broken before this. Woo! That came off there quick. Those parts are gonna add up to maybe another couple $100, call it 200. And then we have things like the fenders and the doors, but every single one of these has just enough damage to make it not really worth taking off the car. It's really the same problem we ran into on the interior. These cars are so mass produced that you can get one of these fenders aftermarket, brand new in the box, for like 70 bucks. So even if it's a factory fender, if it's got a little damage like this, nobody wants them. All in, for the exterior, we've got $2,150. Plus another like $150 if you count the scrap metal price for the doors and the fenders.
Recycling.
That is recycling. Green. Go green.
Exactly.
By green, I mean money. So we've already made half our money back on the body and the interior alone, and now we get to the part of the car where we can really start racking up some dollars. The brakes, the suspension, the drivetrain, starting with what's probably the easiest money out there on Camaros, the Brembo brake calipers. They are, without a doubt, the undisputed GOAT of brake caliper swaps. They make kits to put these on pretty much every car out there. Well, imports, European cars, and this entire set of factory Brembo brake calipers is only $400. And while that's not necessarily ideal for what we're doing here, I do think it's awesome that there's a quality set of mass-produced and affordable calipers out there to swap on the, again, whatever car you want. Now, I think we can all agree the rules, if there are any rules, to this whole new salvage series, which still is yet to be named, so if you got any suggestions down in the comments. The rules, they're pretty fast and loose. The one thing, though, that I honestly do try to avoid is jumping around. Let's say, for example, while Fernando was pulling that rear Brembo off, we saw something under the car, it's going to pay for half the car. I mean, we can't just jump straight to it. We got to stick to the plan and finish up the suspension first, and then it's party time. But for now, we have to take care of these coilovers that are definitely, most certainly not $200 from Temu. You got experience in cheap coilovers or what?
Yeah, I know about that.
Now, I'm not going to say they're a terrible product because I've never personally used them. I know there's a lot of people that do and probably do it with a bit of success. But I am going to say it's probably a solid bet that they're not the longest lasting, highest performing coilovers. And speaking of solid bets, Super Bowl 59 is right around the corner, and it's the perfect time to get in on the action with our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, they're giving all new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly after betting just $5. And you can stay in on the action, use your $200 in bonus bets on DraftKings same-game parlays for a chance at an even bigger payout. Maybe you prefer the thrill of live betting? Well, DraftKings has you covered there too. You can bet live on in-progress games right as they're happening, making watching the game all that much more exciting. After all, you gotta find some way to keep it entertaining. When my beloved Blackbirds from Baltimore are up 30 points on your favorite team at halftime, assuming it's not the playoffs. And if sports betting's not available yet in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have a shot to win cash prizes. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code ScrapLife and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 back in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code ScrapLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, now that we got those budget coilovers out of the way, it's time for that, big money business, if you will. Nailed it. And no, we're definitely not talking about this spaghetti noodle-shaped exhaust. So, we do have one good boiler muffler. Maybe if somebody got in an accident and just happens to need a driver one, it'll have some value, and we'll call it $50. We are talking about this rear differential, which is not from a Camaro SS. This is a rear differential setup out of the factory supercharged Camaro ZL1. It's far and away one of the largest rear differentials I've seen in a production car, period. And it holds up to basically anything you can throw at it. And to run this diff in a Camaro SS, you're going to need the ZL1 drive shaft as well, along with these big old girthy axles. One of the other really cool features about this ZL1 diff setup is it has an internal fluid pump to run its own dedicated cooler. Though on this, they've chose to block it off, though I can't really say I blame them. It's more for road racing type cars than it is for your average street car. So for all intents and purposes, the entire rear half of this car has been converted to Camaro ZL1, which on one hand is really, really confusing. They did all this. They spent a ton of money on this rear end setup, a ton of money on that LS9 blower, and then bought $200 coilovers. Why cheap out on one of the most critical areas of the car? I can't say I really understand that. Check this out. What's that say? Raymond's Align. Maybe the old owner was named Raymond. I guess he got a shaft tune up. This thing has not been off in a very long time.
Which is good, right?
I guess. Short of finding like a bag of cash in the trunk or figuring out that that engine is a built LS9, this is about as good of a surprise as we could have possibly hoped for in this car. As for exactly how much this is worth though, it's all going to depend on what kind of ZL1 this came out of. Clear? Yeah, we're good.
That looks suspicious.
Steady. Yeah, threw all the brake rotors in the trunk, that way it didn't, The manual ZL1s, they came with a 373 ratio. The automatics, they came with a 323. I'm assuming this is probably, can I get that in there? flawless aim. I'm assuming this is a 323 being that it was in an auto car. Improvised cleaner there. 373. This is the most expensive ZL1 differential you can get. This is absolute best case scenario. Now the way we're gonna sell this thing is exactly as it sits, with the ZL1 subframe that they've also put like polyurethane bushings in at some point, along with the drive shaft. That way somebody will be able to take the whole package and put it right back into their Camaro SS, and for this whole deal, it's gonna net us $3,500, which pays for more than half the car. Just for reference, this is what a Camaro SS diff is supposed to look like. And these are really strong differentials in their own right, but they're still tiny compared to the ZL1. Also, the ZL1, it has an iron center section. These are aluminum. These are actually really popular to swap into a ton of different cars. I think S2000 guys use them. If we'd have got one of these, it'd have been worth somewhere between $800 and $1,000. So any way you shake it, this is roughly $2,500 W. So between our baller diff setup, our cheapo coilovers, the Brimbos, and this, we're gonna call it $4,000, which means we've officially paid for the car, and this is our spoils. The only question now is, what exactly do we have here? We know we got an LS9 blower, right? So realistically, whatever way this plays out, it's already a huge win. Now, as far as the engine goes, what's supposed to come in this car is the L99. It's a slightly detuned version of the 6.2 liter LS3, but on a car that's had this level of modification, maybe they swapped it out to an LS3, maybe they converted it to an LS3, which you can also do, or maybe it's an LSA engine. Maybe, best case scenario, it's an LS9. But there is only one way to find out. All right, hey, at the very least, we're off to a good start because the oil looks great. You know, we've been on a hot streak here, Fernando. For a while, you know, a little bit, about a year ago, we were down in the dumps with this whole oil thing. Things were not going good. Pretty much every time we popped the oil drain plug, it was bad news bears.
We're definitely getting experience, right?
We can't attribute this to us, let's be real.
It's true.
This is luck, but I'll take it. Figuring out what the engine is, that should be easy. There's all kinds of markings on it, really shouldn't be a problem. Figuring out what the transmission is, though, that's going to be a bit tougher. Unless there's some kind of random marking, some engraving from some aftermarket company, it's really going to be a struggle to know what's inside the transmission. One thing we can figure out, though, is if it has an aftermarket torque converter. On a car that's been modded like this, I did fully expect to pull this inspection plate off and see a blue, a yellow, I don't know, a bright red torque converter, but it is the factory finish. It's old, it's rusty, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's probably the original factory torque converter. The more we get under this thing, the more the pieces of the puzzle just really start coming together. I think the person who built this car must have had access to a full wrecked ZR1. This little guy right here, this is a factory Corvette ZR1 intercooler pump. And I realize that doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you consider the fact that this thing alone is like $700, there's no good reason somebody would use it in a build like this. There's aftermarket intercooler pumps that are half the price and perform 5 times as well. The only reason these are so expensive is because they fail occasionally, and people that want a factory stock ZR1 want a direct replacement instead of retrofitting some aftermarket unit. Whatever the reason though, I ain't complaining because this is a huge unexpected come up for us. Took a second. One thing, though, that is very much not factory is this transmission cooler. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is probably a better performing transmission cooler than most of the factory ones, but there is one thing about it. Check out that mounting bracket. Oh. I didn't have my safety squints on in time. Woo! Pocket sand, right?
You just take a shower of sand.
This, you know, really seems like another one of those build dance type moments.
Don't do that.
Oh. What's it for? Mopar, baby. A PT Cruiser oil filter housing gasket.
Hell yeah.
We've seen some janky mounting in the past, but a PT Cruiser oil filter housing gasket, new high score, if you will. One other little mod they have on here that's not really a surprise at all is a set of aftermarket headers with most likely high flow cats. We got a cat in there, or they gutted out. Oh yeah, there's a cat in there.
I think you're lying. I didn't hear the whew. It's just
Not that kind of cat.
Oh, okay.
Now you know.
be specific.
I see what you did there. As for how much they're worth, it's all gonna depend on what brand they are once we get them off. They don't look, you know, ultra cheap, but they don't look like the higher end brands, you know, the Stainless Works, the American Racing, the Cooks. On the top side of things, there's really not much in the way of mods, outside of the obvious, of course, the blower. We've got this K&N intake, which is extremely specific to an LS9 blower in this chassis. So there's probably like one person on the planet that can actually use it, and it was the guy who used to own this car. So as far as value goes on this, I mean, I really don't know. There's probably not much. Maybe somebody can adapt it to another type of supercharger setup, even though those throttle body positions are very distinct. I guess we'll call it, I don't know, $100. We've also got this Hotchkiss 4-point strut tower brace, and I gotta give Fernando some props here. Before we started filming this, what'd you say it would cost?
$300.
The first listing on Google Shopping, $300.75.
Damn! Sometimes I impress myself too.
You Googled it, right?
I didn't even know the brand.
I didn't see you not cheat.
I didn't cheat at all.
Do we believe him? Yes? No? I don't know, put it in the comments. We'll let the investigation play out before we make any real accusations against Fernando. It is a nice piece though, regardless. And I think it'll, I don't know, get us 200 bucks used. Not that these have any monetary value necessarily, but we can add this to the list of just random parts they use that are factory off ZR1s. The supercharger cooling system bleed port, this fitting, it's all the stuff that they use on the ZR1s. I think it's cool they integrated all these factory parts. However, they came to the conclusion that that was the right thing to do. Same deal with this power steering reservoir. It's a factory ZR1 power steering reservoir. They're not cheap. Again, it would be just as easy, probably a lot more cost effective, to use one that wasn't straight out of a ZR1. One thing they did though that's not at all optimal is they ran the supercharger cooling lines from the blower to the intercooler pump right to the heat exchanger. There was no reservoir on every single supercharged car that I've touched, at least. There's always been a reservoir on the intercooler system. The general rule of thumb here is the higher the intercooler system's capacity, the more heat it's going to dissipate. This is about as low of a capacity of a supercharger intercooler system as you could possibly design, and I can't imagine it was great for the intake temperatures. There's a pan under there, don't worry. Last order of business before we can hopefully at least drop this thing out of here is the wiring. The ECU, the fuse box. Gotta love Chevy for this one. They made it so easy to get these motors ready to come out. All the wiring you need to attend to, right here in this corner, that is literally it. Such a good sound, such a good feeling too. Taking off these crusty, haven't been removed in a decade seemingly, ECU connectors. As is standard, I'm sure there's one or two things we forgot, but I think we're pretty well squared away to drop this thing out.
You look comfortable there.
No problemo here. Ugh. To be fair, we didn't forget to unbolt it. It was just having a little tough time coming off. All right. One brand, well, not at all brand new. One brand used, actually, you know what? We still don't know exactly what we have here. we'll get to that. First things first, though, this chassis, it's paid its dues. It's lived its life. It's time to put it out of its misery.
R.I.P. now, right?
R.I.P. Just for good measure, probably keep old girl, you know, hanging on the other side of the shop for a couple weeks, just in case we find any random parts we need. Then we'll, you know, oh, batteries. I almost spoke too soon.
You look nervous.
What do you mean? It's just how I look, man. Don't worry about it. All right. Back to the engine. First and foremost on this thing, the engine's just dirty. It kind of looks like it's never been removed. If it has, it surely hasn't been any time recently. And the easiest way to ID these engines is this little code on the back of the passenger cylinder head. 823. That tells us exactly what cylinder heads these are, and by extension, what engine this at least likely is. And it's the L99 that was supposed to come in this car all along. Then, on the back of the engine block, I know it's a little hard to see, we've got the part number for the block casting itself of 12621766. That casting number, it applies to the L99, the LS3, the LSA, and I think the LS9, though I could be wrong about that. But given the cylinder heads that are attached to it, I think it's more than safe to say that this engine is the original L99 out of the Camaro. But they did do a little bit of work to it, and I'm curious exactly how much work. The L99s from the factory, as I mentioned earlier, have displacement on demand, meaning they can shut down 4 cylinders under certain conditions for gas mileage or whatever. But for that displacement on demand, there's a big actuator that goes on the timing cover that's behind the crank pulley and behind the water pump. And that is no longer there. At the very least, they've ditched the entire displacement on demand system, converting this into what amounts to a true LS3 rather than the L99. To delete the DOD, you need to do a fair bit of work. This valley cover, that needs to be changed. The lifters, you need to pull the cylinder heads off, so it's not a minor procedure. So the real question is, did they just do the bare bones displacement on demand delete, or did they do anything a bit more fun? Luckily, there's a pretty easy way to tell exactly how wild they went with this, but before we get into that, might as well go ahead and pull off our last little bit of profit here. We didn't know what these were before, but we do now, thanks to that little logo right there, SP. They're stainless power. They're a nice set of headers. They're just under that like upper echelon of the Stainless Works, American Racing, etc. I think they're like $1,000 new. It's got some dents on it. What do you say, Fernando? What do you want to call this?
High flow cats, probably like 657. What do you think?
650. We'll go 650, being that it has some dents. I guess that about does it. Now we can add it up and see exactly how we did. So between all the aftermarket parts, the few OEM ZR1 parts, and the couple universal parts we have, like the transmission cooler, the heat exchanger, and then there's the full Camaro radiator assembly, we're gonna call it $1,800. So let's see, where does that get us? I'm gonna call that engine ETC. 1,800. Yes, I know I write the 8's weird. $96.50 for a car that we paid $6,600 for. Now, this is the part of the video where we have to bring this back down to reality. This is what all this stuff might sell for. Of course it looks great on paper, or in this case, a deck lid, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. But this doesn't at all take into account all the expenses we've incurred while dealing with this whole thing. Time we have invested doing all this work. The fact that we're gonna have to probably ship all those parts, then there's the couple $100 we had to spend to get the car itself shipped to us here at the shop. Cool as it would be to say we made all this money and got this sick engine set up for free, I think it would be much more realistic to say that we broke even on the car. We got enough excess parts to pay for the car, pay for our time, and all the costs that go along with it, and got this for free. Which, by any and every possible metric, is a massive freaking W. Frankly, I'd have done all this work for the supercharger itself, much less a running, driving engine swap with a supercharger on top of it. At this point, it feels like we're playing with house money a little bit. We still got to figure out what's going on inside of it. And I think if we pop this valve cover off, and it has factory valve train, it's safe to say they did the bargain basement DOD delete. If it's got a set of dual valve springs in it, Maybe they did an aftermarket cam. It's just not a huge aftermarket cam, which is why we didn't hear it going all, you know, blah, 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 blah. What was that thing you did, Fernando?
No, you did it great.
One thing that's pretty interesting here, this is either a factory LS9 or LSA valve cover. Ooh, it's been on there for a while too. Oh, there we go. They, however, have modified it. I don't want to look in there yet. With a big aftermarket oil fill. The valve train though, if it's not the original one from this engine, it's certainly a stock replacement. It's nothing fancy, unfortunately. Based on that, fully expect the bottom end to be factory as well, but you know, why not give it a look? Get her down in the hole there. Oof, you see that? Nope. A little rust on the spark plugs. That's not ideal necessarily. Yep, that is a stock piston, as stock as stock gets. That little cut on top of the piston there almost looks like a valve smashed into the piston, but the L99 pistons, they have reliefs on them like that from the factory. Cylinder walls, I mean, that looks pretty good, right? It's stock. It is very, very stock. Just DOD deleted, which I know I'm saying like it's a bad thing, but we can't lose sight of the fact that this is free. Free 99, F-R-E-E, $0.00. As cool as it would have been to have a LS9, or maybe even better yet, some crazy built engine, you know, beggars can't be choosers, right? We've got a free LS with an LS9 blower on it. You know, we should probably just stop, right? Like, we should quit while we're ahead, not worry.
We should just start looking for the shells right now.
That's true. Yeah, that's the other question. We have to have a discussion about what we should put this in. Or, alternatively, should we just sell it and put the money towards something else, like another Hellcat, you know?
I think that money will probably go to credit cards.
For the past Hellcats. Then we sell it, which, yes, is a realistic possibility, but frankly, we need the money for the other bills we've been lately. Also, though, it's an LS9 blower, so yeah, we probably put it to good use.
Definitely.
This is a tough one.
That's what the comments are for, you know?
Nope. You've got your assignment, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Oh.
LS9 blower, and then bought $200 coil. This might be the best. What's that thing doing?